and something else to be very happy about in terms of their rugby. So I'm looking forward to the challenge of doing it. I'm 3 months into the job now, and I still remain optimistic but realistic. So happy to answer any of your questions that you have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Okay, so we'll take questions first from the working press. You can raise your hand. I'll try to get around the room as much as I can. And when you come up to speak, please give your name and your affiliation, please. Fred.
Good to see you, Eddie. Welcome back. The last time you spoke to us, FCCJ, was actually 8 years ago, the day after you became unemployed.
All right.
And at that press conference, I just watched a little bit of it this morning. You said Japan had no plan for success. The JRFU has no elite development plan. And, the universities, you're unhappy with the universities. And what's changed, what has changed, and what will change, and what do you think will change with you being back here?
So that's a good question. Well, I think there's definitely an intent to change now. I don't think previously Japan had any inkling of what high performance was about. I think it was just, we'll just do our best. And we basically did our best out of a situation where traditionally, everything had gone along as it has. But now I think definitely in terms of Japan Rugby Union, there's an intent to create a high-performance environment. And what I mean by that is that the top players have the opportunity to be the best in the world. And I think League One's definitely changed in that regard. And now, I look at all the league, or most of the League One teams, they're coached by the best coaches in the world. They've got great training environments, and they're really bringing the players through. If we can encourage the top players in the university to do that, and that may be a combination of giving there's already been an early entry for third and fourth year players. I saw the young boy from Takeout Hooker play for Kubota on the weekend, came on in the second half and played brilliantly. So that's a new thing. So there's this intent to bring those younger players through quickly, and we're looking at more opportunities to do that. So I think that's changed considerably, mate. The intent, maybe not the structure or the format, but definitely the intent. So I don't know whether that answers your question or not.
Yeah. When you left, you obviously had some issues. So has the JRFU actually promised you certain things?
Well, there's been no promises. I think, one of the things I've learnt in rugby is that people always, whenever you take over a team, you generally only get a team. As a coach, you get a team that's not performing well. No one gives you a team that's going well, and the national union's going gangbusters. So you always go to a team that's in a difficult situation. Everyone wants to support that. But the reality is, what can you really do? Each national union I've been to has its own restrictions about what they can do and what they would like to do. So what I know from the Japan Rugby Union now is that they've got the intent to develop a better high-performance environment. So it probably doesn't answer your question, but it's as close as we're going to get.
Yes. Excuse me.
Peter Lyon with Forbes magazine. Thank you very much for coming today. We really appreciate it. You mentioned a moment ago, as part of your strategies, that you mentioned, I think, speed repeat. Speed repeat is part of what you're doing. You also mentioned that to get your team to, or a lot of the players to the League One, you need to do certain things. Can you maybe pinpoint 2 or 3 things that need to happen to get those players to League One? Is it mental? Is it physical? What actually lacks in the Japanese players right now?
No, very good question, Peter. I think one of the things I've learned about Japanese players is that you've got to coach them as a whole, that you can't differentiate between the physical the skill, the emotional, and the psychology. That you've got to look at the player as a whole. And I think at the moment it's a little bit about they don't aim high enough. You know, they're whenever you've had success, you know, people like to get comfortable. We all like to get comfortable. We all want to have a nice life, be comfortable. You know, you look at World War II, after World War II in Japan, everyone worked hard. They wanted a new fridge. They wanted a new car. You know, they wanted a new colour television. Now you don't have to work that hard to get that. And it happens in rugby as well. Like, unless you're the All Blacks or possibly South Africa, which have this tradition of just striving to be your best all the time, people want to get comfortable, you know. And so Japan's really risen remarkably, haven't they? Like, you think about where Japan was to where they are now. They've done a fantastic job, Japanese Rugby Union. And so now we've got to make them a little bit more uncomfortable to reach higher, to work that little bit harder. And for young kids to understand that they can't just do what the coach tells them to do. They got to work out what they need. They've got to be more self-directed, more take ownership of their careers. Because you think about in baseball, 30 years ago, a kid would have been dreaming, you know, kids playing. I saw Michael Leach on Sunday, who was playing, hitting with his young son, all right? And his young son, if he was there 30 years ago, he would have been dreaming of playing for the Giants or playing for the Buffaloes or playing for the Bay Stars. And now Japanese boys dreaming of playing for the Dodgers, playing for Red Sox now, because they can do it. And we need Japanese players to think like that, to want to be the best in the world, want to be the absolute best in the world. And so it's you've got to support them. You've got to, you know, we spoke about with Fred there, we've got to have a high performance environment that supports them. And, you know, and Era's one example of that's happening now. He's now with Kubota. He's being taught by Dane Coles. You know, so he couldn't have a better mentor. So that's gonna make him come through a bit quicker. And we need to get those kids at those ages to come through quicker, push them to be a bit, to give a bit more, but also want to do it themselves. You know, I think we all know as the generation changes, it's less about telling them and more about them taking ownership of what they do. But the environment creates that the right questions for them to ask and the right way to go. So we've got to keep creating a better high performance environment for those young kids to come through, and keep giving them the opportunity to look ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take an online question here. This is from excuse me. This is from John Geddy at Reuters. He's a Scotsman. He's asking about the Six Nations. He's asking, Eddie, could you give your assessment of how the teams are going in that tournament, specifically England, given your experience coaching them? And then he has a follow-up question on Marcus Smith, on whether he should start against France, given his heroics at the weekend. He says that when you were coach in 2022, you said Smith needed the experience of Farrell in the team to help him run the game. Now Farrell's out of the picture. What is your assessment now of Smith? So the two things, the teams of the tournament and Smith.
Well, I think, yeah, my experience of the Six Nations post the World Cup, it's always a bit different, because teams have either peaked at the World Cup and then you're trying to restructure the team, or you're continuing on with their team. And we've seen with France, you know, they've gone through they had a massive rebuild for this World Cup, but now they've lost Dupont, they've lost Intermac, and they've had to rebuild their team. So they've gone through a difficult stage, new coaching staff. They're trying to find out the right style of play, and they basically, you know, resurrected their game through a huge kicking game and then a counter-attack game. And they seem to move away a little bit from that at the start of the tournament, but I think they're going back to that. So I think, you know, France in the last game will be difficult. Ireland are the most consistent rugby country. You know, the way their system operates, they produce top provincial teams, based on a strong, school system. The central administration manages the team well, and they have the beauty of cohesion. Cohesion in rugby is massive because it's probably is there a bigger team game in the world played by more number AFL, but that's 18 players on a cricket field. But in terms of rugby, we've got 15 players trying to play together, so cohesion is so important. And Ireland, because they've got the bulk of the team coming from Leinster, have created that into a significant advantage for themselves. And so they continue. They obviously got beaten by England on the weekend, but they're still a very good side. Scotland's probably riding at their peak at the moment. You've got Finn Russell probably at his most mature, Van der Merwe, the winger. They've got a lot of good players at the moment, and they're playing good rugby under Townsend. Italy, disappointing World Cup, but they had a very young team. I think they had the second or third youngest team at the World Cup, and so now they're getting the advantage of that experience. They've got a new coach come in who's probably a little bit more pragmatic in the way he plays, but they're basing their success on Benetton, who were running third or fourth in the URC, which is basically 80% of the Italian team. England have brought through some new good young players, which is great to see. And Steve Walker, as I've spoken about before, is a fantastic coach. And they've been through a cycle where 2019 made the World Cup final, 2023 semi-final, and now those older players are being recycled. And they've found some good new young talent coming through, which brings us to Marcus Smith, who's probably now 24, 25. And he'll be reaping the benefits of the experience he's had, and his turn will come. Again, if I look at Richie Mwanga, who's 30 now, he's probably at the peak of his powers at 30. And for those 10s, it takes time to mature. Look at Sexton at the World Cup, 38. Incredible that he could play so well at 38. So for those 10s now, we used to think of rugby players that finish at 31, 32, but those 10s now are almost like American football quarterbacks where they can play, close to 40. We look at most American quarterbacks now, they can play until they're 40, and we're seeing the same thing in rugby. So Marcus Smith's best time is to come. So would I pick him? I would never tell Steve who to pick.
I think you missed out the Welsh.
Oh, Welsh, yeah, well, they, not by purpose. It was funny, I was going up the elevator and the Welsh guy came out and he said, I said hello, and he said, yeah, hello. He said, you said something about my country a long time ago. I said, oh, did I? And he started laughing. People don't forget, do they? People don't forget. Welsh, well, they're going through a total rebuild. So it's a tough Six Nations for Warren Gatland, but he took an old team to the World Cup, got the most out of them they could, and then he had to rebuild. And the hard thing about international rugby, speaking as a coach, is the rebuild, because particularly when you're with a country that has high expectations of winning, that's the most difficult time for a coach.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the floor? Yes, sir. And I'll come to you next.
Hi, Eddie. Andrew McCurdy from AFP. It's not your problem anymore, but what do you think the future of Australian rugby is going to be like over the next year or so? Well, until the next World Cup.
Yeah, it's not my problem anymore. And they probably don't want to know my opinion anyway. But look, Australia's always got good talent. Whereas Australia's a sporting country, there's plenty of good talent comes through. It's just they've got to find a better way of harnessing the talent and developing the talent. And there's financial problems with the Super Rugby teams, which may cause a change in the structure of how Super Rugby operates, and that might help the development of talent. But we took the youngest squad to the World Cup, mate, by a long way. And I think that young talent will start to come through. It'll take 2 or 3 years. So I think by the World Cup, they'll be a strong side. Yeah, and they've got a great coach in Joe Smith.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi, Eddie. Mike Galbraith, freelance. I actually have 3 questions for you. Well, first of all, high school rugby has to be the one of the bases for the national rugby team, but it's in severe decline. I think in the last 20 years, 40% down in the number of high school players. Number of high schools playing is about a quarter of the soccer teams and baseball teams, and I don't know, maybe more than 50% don't even have 15 players, so they have to merge with another school. Do you have any ideas or suggestions how to overcome this problem? Because basically rugby is the best sport for, as you suggested, create a team. It suits the Japanese psyche. So that's one question. Second question is about Chichibunumiya Stadium. I wonder what your feelings are about this. And
Redevelopment?
yes, the destruction of Chichibunumiya. As far as I'm concerned, it's the destruction. And my third question is a personal one. I'm British. You talked about speed. You had in your squad one of the fastest players on the planet, but you didn't play him very often. I'm talking about Henry Arundel.
Oh, well, I think I did. I think I gave him his first caps, and I think I played him as much as I could.
Right.
So
and,
I can't answer that question, mate. Sorry.
and
that's
Borthwick,
not fact.
Borthwick also didn't really play
I
him.
can't speak for
I just
Steve.
wonder what was the problem, because I was hoping he was going to play every game after having watched him a few times, but didn't show up.
Yeah. Well, with Henry, I'll answer that one because it's clear in my mind. We brought him on the Australian tour as a 19-year-old. He played twice off the bench. Then we went back. He was injured during the Six Nations, couldn't select him. And then I left. So I've got an absolute clear conscience. But a young guy like that, I understand your frustration. But you got to remember the player's got a huge responsibility there to keep developing. And sometimes these young guys, they get opportunities and they don't work hard enough to keep developing. And the coach gets blamed for it, but it's actually the player's issue. Now he's taking himself off to France and he said he doesn't want to play for England. So what do you do? Yeah, I can understand. He's a rich talent, mate. Exceptional player. I'll tell you a quick story about him. We were training in Perth at Hale School. Beautiful grounds. And Justin Langer, the former Australian cricket coach, came and watched training because he came and spoke to the staff. Anyway, the ball got kicked down and Arundel got the ball and he beat the whole team and scored a try, right? Scored a try. And all you could hear was, shit, he's fast. And that was Justin Langer yelling out. There's a strong Aussie accent. But yeah, he's exceptional talent, mate. But he's got to want to do it himself. And, there might be a question mark on that. I don't know. But certainly I've got a clear conscience on that. You can't blame me for that one. All right? I can be blamed for a lot of things, mate. I can't be blamed for that one. Chichibunumiya, rich history. I really don't know what the next plan is. I try to keep out of those things if I can. But certainly it was a ground where a lot of good rugby was played, a lot of good experiences. And recently I think the atmosphere at the grounds with the League One and the universities. I went to a university game in Tokai Ritsukeizai, and they each had their army of supporters, and they were singing and chanting. It was a great environment. So whatever happens next, I hope it's as half as good a ground as Chichibu was, because to have a rugby ground in central Tokyo like that was brilliant, wasn't it? Absolutely brilliant. So I can understand your frustration. Are they? Okay. Well, that's the modern way, mate. That's the modern way to keep things afloat. They did it with Racing in Paris. Same thing. They created an indoor stadium so they can use the facility all round. And I think with space at such a premium in Tokyo, that was probably the only way they could get it redeveloped, was to make it into a multi-purpose stadium, which is disappointing for rugby, but maybe good for Tokyo. High school rugby. You're 100% right. So I think around the world now, rugby's in danger with HIA. It's seen as a dangerous sport. So first thing we need to do is to make the sport safe, which I think World Rugby's done a fantastic job. I think, the lowering of the tackle height, the way we look after HIA players is first class. So I think we're doing that. And then kids will play rugby if they're well coached. So I think the problem of high school rugby is we've got to get the kids to be coached really well, and the Japan Rugby Union's got to invest in the development of coaches. That's important. So kids have good experience, because if a kid has a good experience at rugby, he wants to go next week. But if he's just holding pads and getting knocked over, he's not going to want to go. So I went on 4 weeks ago. I went to Oyama Gakuen, just up the road there, or no, it's probably in Oyama, and to watch their training. So they're in central Tokyo. They got a dirt pitch. It was middle of winter. The pitch was frozen. So they trained in a room this big with pads, 30 kids. And the dedication those kids had in trying to be better rugby players was fantastic. So I think about high school rugby in Japan. We've got to do everything we can to support it. And I think it always comes through better coaching. And then then you want to have better facilities. Because training on when you can't train on a pitch because it's frozen, it's difficult. And then try to make the sport as safe as we can. Good questions.
Okay, any more good questions from the floor? Fred again?
8 years ago when you were here, you said, Japan will get to a higher level if the growth continues. So could you just talk a little bit about the team in the last 8 years and maybe what Jamie Joseph did with the team?
Well, I thought 2019, I was coaching England, and obviously I was reasonably busy there, but I was a massive fan of the way they played. I thought against Ireland and Scotland, if they were playing in pink jersey, you would have known it was Japan. The speed and the way they took it to the opposition was fantastic. But, then I don't think they could have played any better at that 2019 World Cup. And I think, you go to grounds now, and one of the most significant thing I see is you see spectators wearing Japanese jerseys. And now even neutral fans wear Japanese jerseys, whereas no one would have wore one 8 years ago. 2023, I think, was always going to be a difficult World Cup for Japan. If you look at the players that were successful in 2015, I think 10 of those went through to 2019. So that squad was fairly consistent from one to the other. But then you had a bit of an ageing squad, and so that World Cup was going to be difficult. And I think COVID probably affected Japan more than any other country. Virtually for 2 years there was no games, so it was hard to pick younger players coming through because they didn't have the experience. And you think about 2015, we had 8 players, I think, playing Super Rugby, so they brought back that experience. 2019, you had the younger players playing Sunwolves, and 2023, you had younger players not even playing rugby. So that was always a difficult job, but Jamie did a fantastic job. Jamie and Tony Brown did an absolutely fantastic job. They should make a statue of him at the new Chichibuna there.
Andy,
Okay, question from Teddy.
if I may. Teddy Jimbo with the videonews.com. As a new head coach of Japan national team, do you actually have expanded role compared to what you had? But that was 8 years ago that you were the coach before. Do you have more authority given compared to that time? And just a little bit of follow-up question to Fred's, but you always said the high school and college are the, well, you didn't say problem, but we need to sort of raise the level of high school and college. And as a, in your new role, what do you actually plan to do that, to realize that?
Okay, good questions again. I can see why you're sitting at the front table. In terms of my role is to win with the national team. But part of the process of becoming the national coach was agreeing to take a role in developing Japanese rugby. And I don't have any administration role. So I think the difference between administrating, creating structure and helping it is different. So what I've tried to do is to get out there to clubs, to get out there to the university. So I've met with Tokai, Tenri, Waseda, Meiji, Kyoto Sankyo. So I've visited those universities, specifically to chat to the head coach about how important a role they have, whether we can provide any assistance to them, what are their players that we see as being players that potentially can play in the World Cup in 2027, and then how we can work together to create those players. So that's something. It's my role in developing Japanese rugby is more relational than administration. Because I'm not the high performance director. I am the national coach. So I've already said about that. I was at Ritsukeizai. It was freezing yesterday, absolutely freezing. We did a session on the field. I had the best Korean food in Ritsukeizai yesterday. Best Korean food. If you ever go to the university, go to the Korean restaurant. It's fantastic. Fantastic. Best rugby lunch I've had. Best rugby lunch I've had. Because the kantoku there is Korean. So visited there, did a session with their kids. Visited Keio. I've done a session with Keio High School and Keio University. So I'm trying to get out there and sell the message of how important it is. I've visited the 19s national team training, visited 20s national team training. I'm going out there on Friday again. So I'm trying to play more of a guidance role for them. And then we've just got to keep encouraging them to be better. And that's my role. And then the administrative part, the high performance part, is the Japan Rugby Union's responsibility.
But what do you think is the problem? I mean, I think they're trying to do their best, but you still think some things needs to be changed, and it doesn't have to be your role. But what do you think are the sort of changes that we need in high school and the college? If you have a full authority, what would you do?
Yeah, I think in both of them, because high school and university rugby, and high school more particularly, has been a tournament-based competition. I think they need to have a league, and it might be only the top 10 teams have a league that they play to each other, and they need to play more games. That's the first thing. If you consider most of the games they play are practice games, right? They need to play more league games, and that could be done. But it would take change. And universities the same. I think, you know, it's great having the Kanto League, Taiko-sen, Kansai League. But ideally, you'd have a top 8 competition like in basketball in America, where they play against each other home and away over a period of time. And I think the other thing that's missing is, if you look at the best players in Japan, they play for Japan under 20s. And then unless they're exceptional like a Kenki Fukuoka, they don't get picked for any sort of national team until they're fully developed.
Right.
And maybe that there's a need for an under 23 type team there that can bridge the gap and keep an eye on them, keep developing, keep encouraging them to work hard.
And how is JRFU responding to your advice or your your words?
No, pretty good. Yeah, it's ongoing. Yeah.
Okay. But
Not an easy assignment. Like anywhere you go, like, sorry, I forgot your name. Andrew. Andrew asked a question about Australia. Like, I went to Australia with a clear mandate that we needed to change the system, and we actually put it in the contract that we needed to change the system. Otherwise, I wasn't going to stay.
Right.
It's always difficult. Like Australia couldn't do it. Japan is in the middle of really, I think, trying hard, because they know for rugby to continue to be a predominant sport in Japan, we need the national team to win. So the national team to win, we need to develop the best young talent. So it goes hand in hand, and Japan, the JRFU is very serious about it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I've got a quick question from myself, actually.
Yeah.
Kind of following on. So this year, Japan's going to be playing in the Pacific Nations Cup against teams such as Canada, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and the United States. All competitive teams, but not at the same level as the teams competing in the Six Nations or in the Rugby Championship. So Japan plays a lot of friendly matches, not so many competitive games. Where would you like to see Japan playing ultimately, maybe a few years down the line?
Yeah, I think ultimately, you'd like Japan to be playing the Rugby Championship. Yeah, that would be the ideal situation, that they're playing against New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, Australia frequently. Like, the only way you get better is by playing above yourself. So that would be the ideal situation. And I know there has been preliminary discussions about that, but that's, it's still a long way from being a decided factor.
But do you think Japan needs more competitive matches?
No. I think, this year we've got 11, 12 tests, I think. That's the maximum you can play. Given top League One, they'll play about 20 games. So you got your top players playing 20 games for their club, 10 or 11 tests. You can't play any more than that. And it's one of the hard things of rugby. As soon as rugby becomes commercial and professional, people want more games. But the players can't. You can't be like baseball and play 2 games a week, or you can't be like soccer and play 2 games a week. Rugby's a game where you can only, the best you can do each year is play 30 games for the top players. More than that, you're putting the players at risk, because it's such a physical, exacting game.
Okay, any more questions from the floor? We'll get Andrew again. Can't have you hogging it too much, Fred.
Fred's got that video from 2015.
He's got something up his sleeve there, hasn't he?
He's got one more there.
Obviously, you have a long-term plan for Japanese rugby, but your first game is going to be against England at the National Stadium. As a former England head coach, that must be something that you're really looking forward to, and also the fact that it's going to be at the National Stadium. It'll be full probably, and it'll be a situation that you probably couldn't have imagined last time you were head coach. What are your thoughts about that game?
I think, as you said, Andrew, I think it's amazing that Japan gets to play England twice. Once at National Stadium, once at Twickenham. You know, so you could have 180,000 people at the two games. So having coached England, yeah, England's almost, and knowing Steve, England's almost the opposite of what we're going to try to do. Almost the opposite. You know, they want to defend, they want to kick, they want to be tough. We want to run, we want to move the ball quickly. So it's going to be a contrasting style. So the only disappointment is we're kicking off at 3 o'clock. I wanted to kick off at the hottest time of the day, which was 2 o'clock. But unfortunately, we can't do that. So we're still going to have to make it hot for them. But it should be a great experience. And for our, you know, we'll probably look at picking a younger team because we need to change the team. What a great experience to start the campaign to the 2027 World Cup against a good England team, well coached. They play the opposite of how we play. And I know when I coached England against Japan, I found Japan easy to beat. You know, you take away a few things away from them, and that's what we've got to create now. We've got to create a team that's not easy to beat. That's not easy to beat. That's hard to beat against those bigger sides. And Japan almost did that at the World Cup in 2023, so we'll continue on the good work of Jamie.
Fred.
Someone needs to burn that video.
8 years ago.
Fred Barker, another softball question from 8 years ago. You said after you left England, well, preface that, great businessmen say they learn more from their mistakes than their successes. You can see where this is going. And after you were let go by England, you admitted you made mistakes. I thought you were let go prematurely. That's my opinion. And presumably Australia wasn't a great success either. So what have you learned from your mistakes that you're bringing to the table now? And tell us what those mistakes were.
Yeah, well, I think you continually learn. I look back at England and I think the mistake I made, I became too aggressive about wanting change in the system. I wanted central contracting. I wanted more control over the players, and I feel like if England had that, you know, if you look at the talent pool of England compared to the talent pool of Ireland, not that Ireland's got a poor talent pool, but it's much smaller, that if England had that, they could be in a different level as a rugby team. You know, they could be consistently top 3 in the world, like Ireland have done. You know, at the moment they bob in and out depending on who comes through, and you don't control that talent, you know, as a national coach. So, and I was too aggressive in pushing that, and you rub people up the wrong way. So then when you don't have a few results, you know, everyone looks to come and get you. I also, one of the most things that still I don't know whether it was a mistake or not, relates to Marcus Smith. I wanted to try to change the style of England, wanted to play a more aggressive attacking style with Marcus there, but it just didn't fit the team at the time. And sometimes you need to push it on a team. Like here for Japan, I don't think we've got any choice. Yeah, to win we have to be different. England, maybe again I could have been more patient, but I'd been there for 7 years and I wanted things to change quickly in that last period of time. So I learned from that. Australia, don't live in your suitcase for 12 months. That was the thing I learned. It was a bad situation. I went there, wanted to make change, wasn't settled, just didn't work. But I don't have any regrets. Like I tried to do my best in a short period of time. And what I think I've left Australia is a young squad that's capable of doing well. And sometimes, you know, you've got to leave things in a better place, and maybe, you know, you take responsibility for the failure, which is okay.
Andy, if I can.
Sure. Teddy.
Yeah. It's kind of Japanese media type of question, but can you mention some names of players whom you found attractive, interesting, or new talent who you like to see play a sort of a major role in the upcoming 2027 World Cup?
Yeah, no, there's some good young players. I've seen a fair few. I don't know whether they can play. It relates back to the previous point about Henry. All we can see is talent. Like, we can see talent. Then are they prepared to work hard? So we've got to encourage them to work hard. So I can remember, if I go back to 2015, seeing Yamasawa as a young 10. Like, he had more talent than any 10 I've ever seen, but hasn't come through. And I don't know why, whether it's been injury or whether there's been other issues, but he had talent. So at the moment, there's a young winger at Meiji called Ebisawa, who's quick, got good feet, bit of a character, lively, Akarui.
He's a freshman too.
Yeah, he could be a good player. Then there's Yazaki at
Yazaki.
at Waseda.
That's from my school. Yeah.
Halfback called Georgie at Kyoto Sankyo. Ishibashi at Kyoto Sankyo. And they got a tight head called Hato at Kyoto Sankyo. So those guys are definitely rich in talent. It's whether they're rich in the work ethic that's the issue now. You know, that's what they've got to find. Because one of the things that I have learned is that, you know, talent is so important, but it's how hard the player works. You know, the best players are the hardest working players. Like, I look at Michael Leach. We had a camp 4 weeks ago, and we trained 2 days, and Michael Leach led everything. 36 years of age, in the middle of the season with Toshiba. He doesn't need to do that. Like, we've got a good relationship. He doesn't need to impress, but he does, because that's the sort of player he is. And that's why he's still playing at the top level now. And they're the players you want. So, you know, with that young talent, we need to keep good senior experience like Leach, possibly Nagaki, Matsushima are going to be key players to be role models, because youth needs role models. Talent needs role models. So some good young talent around.
How long do you think Michael Leach can continue playing at this level?
50.
50.
No, I'm not sure, mate. But certainly he's got the right attitude. He looks after his body incredibly well. There's no reason why he can't keep going for a while longer.
Next World Cup?
Well, you never know, mate. You know, just take it year by year with him. Get through 1 year, still improving. Then he gets to the next year, still improving. And the other thing I think is unique with Japanese players, and Michael's a product of Japan, is I always look at their age and I take 4 years away, because that's what I feel their rugby age is. So, he's 36, he's only really 32, so he might get the next World Cup. They're younger, because whilst some of them have had a lot of rugby training, they haven't had a lot of rugby game time. You know, the rugby game time in Japan is far less than any other country, so they've got a bit more in their legs. You know, I look at someone like Inagaki at 34. You know, there's no reason why he keep going. So we'll see.
Okay, do we have any more questions from the floor? You want to go in? Yep.
So I would like to ask you your opinion about aerial ping pong that takes place in a lot of the games. So it seems to me always that when the fullback kicks to the fullback, he's just giving the ball to the other team. And if the receiver of the ball is smart, he should be able to set up some attack. But it seems they just kick it back and go backwards and forwards. When I first came to Japan and played rugby, nobody kicked the ball at all. They always ran with it, even with penalties. So I don't think Japan is suited to that anyway, but I wondered, both for Japan and also generally speaking, what is your opinion? Are you happy if the fullback just kicks the ball backwards and forwards? Thank you.
Well, David, I've been in the game maybe, I started playing when I was 18, so what's that, 40 odd years ago. Kicking's always been an important part of the game. I played for a club called Randwick, and we ran the ball from everywhere. I prefer playing the running game, but kicking's always been part of the game, and it will continue to be. Like the great the greatest game, Barbarians versus when that 1970 had 90 kicks in the game. But no one worries about that. When it's good rugby, no one worries about it. When it's bad rugby, everyone worries about it. And so there's good kicking and there's bad kicking. What you don't want to see, as you said, is fullbacks continually kicking the ball to each other and everyone stands in the middle and they wait until something happens. No one wants to see that. So, but kicking's an important part of the game. And for Japan, we need to be a running team, we need to be an attacking team, but we need to be able to kick well when we need to. Because the thing about rugby, it hasn't changed since E.B. Clark came to KU University and set rugby up, right? You've got to get down the other end of the field as quickly as you can and keep the opposition from getting down your end. And sometimes you can run, sometimes you can pass, sometimes you can kick, and you've got to get the balance is the most important thing. And what you're saying is that when a team solely relies on kicking, it becomes boring, and I agree. But so we want to run the ball, but we've also got to be a good kicking team. So that's the challenge. That's probably the biggest challenge for us, mate.
Yeah, you talked about all the kicks in 1973 Barbarians game. It was actually one of the kicks that set up what is still called by many the greatest try ever.
So don't argue against yourself. No, you're right, mate. You're 100% right. So that was a kick return, wasn't it? They scored off a kick return. And they worked hard enough. And what you've got to be able to do is when a team does kick badly, punish them for kicking badly. Then they won't want to kick well. But that takes a lot of work to get your kick return game right. But you're right. Good question again.
All right, we're just about out of time. Probably time for one more question. If anyone has anything to ask. I'm sure Teddy's got about 20 questions you want to ask. Maybe?
If there's an... Yeah.
Okay, Fred.
That video's still going. Shit. We've got to burn that video.
I'm going to watch it over and over. Before 8 years ago or whatever it was, we had Super Rugby, right?
Yeah.
And we don't now. Do you see any possibility of some alternative or some substitution for Super Rugby that Japanese clubs or teams can play in?
Well, I think the calendar is, with League One now becoming professional, I think the big difference now is that League One's become professional. Like, I spent December with my old club, Suntory. So they used to be 70% Shine company workers, 30% professional. And now they're the opposite. They're 70% professional, 30% company workers. So it's changed. And so that the League One wants more games, because again, how do they make money? They have more games. So I can't see Super Rugby being part of Japanese rugby for the foreseeable future. I think the quality of League One games at the top level is as close as you get to Super Rugby, really high level. Maybe the cross-border tournaments at the end can be something that adds a little bit more, particularly for those sides that don't make the semi-finals. I think, but again, you look at our top players, if they play all the League One and finals and then play all the test matches, they can't play anymore.
Okay, I think we'll wrap up the press conference. Well, thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
Much appreciate this.
Pleasure.
And here is a year's honorary membership to the club. So please come and join us for a drink
Thank you.
anytime.